Vomit in the sink or sink in the vomit. This is going to be both an analysis and a review of the new Iglooghost EP, Bronze Claw ISO. Iglooghost is an artist that likes to build worlds around each of his projects, and I think the world here is worth delving into. I initially fell in love with Iglooghost's music last year after he released Tidal Memory Exo, which was just an absolutely insane first listen to have. Tidal Memory Exo sort of exemplifies the manic, gritty, and industrial nature of Deconstructed Club, and Tidal Memory ended up being one of my favorite albums of last year. After listening to his other two solo works, I decided to dive into the lore behind Tidal Memory Exo, as Iglooghost is an artist known for constructing literal worlds behind his albums, with Tidal Memory Exo being this sort of post-apocalyptic album where ancient fossils have come back to life as they wash up to shore. And it's an absolutely insane concept, and Iglooghost's new EP, Bronze Claw ISO, takes place in that same world, except Iglooghost has lost the ability to DJ as he was and working at the radio station in that world, as it was taken down by a company called Neurowaste, which plays a major role in the world of this album. Now, before I get into the actual music, I want to summarize and analyze the world that Iglooghost built for Bronze Claw ISO, as even though the EP is just 5 tracks, it provides valuable context to the music itself. And I like to think Iglooghost is sort of a multimedia artist, as he doesn't just focus on the music, he has these worlds as well. So it's important to think about both when encompassing the entire project. So anyways, because Iglooghost lost his ability to work for Chlorine FM, this radio station, he decided to go work for the crane company called Neurowaste that kind of put him out of his job. And that company's job is to make war cranes that kind of destroy the world, whether that be digging into the earth or using them to like fight off these ancient fossils called the algiums, which is one of the fossilized creatures from the last project. There's an entire website you can explore to really connect to the world, so I'm also not going to just summarize what's on there because I'm not lame. Anyways, Iglooghost has control of the Neurowaste website and hates the work, as he has to deal with poor working conditions and works for this like evil, polluting company that just destroys the earth he's in. And there's also good mystery behind the war machines themselves, as Neurowaste refuses to explain what's inside of these modified war cranes, specifically the metal newt, which is this hollow 4-legged creature that, you know, has a saw on its head or a jackhammer. It's moddable in multiple ways. That I'd really just do that. There's a lot of shady shit going on with the machines. Now, even though I just gave a brief introduction into the Neurowaste company, a lot of that is important to the overall themes of the album, as the post-apocalyptic world that Iglooghost builds here is meant to be somewhat similar to our own, as large companies in our world continue dominance with little respect for the life that's on Earth. Whether that be us or the animals that are being killed or the actual Earth itself, there's very little respect for the planet that we inhabit. You know, with the company like this, you're not supposed to ask questions about what's inside of the metal newt. You're not supposed to ask what the meat processing unit does. You're just supposed to do the work on your contract that doesn't pay anything or pays very little, which is kind of the context of what Iglooghost's going through, but you kind of have to thug it out because there's really no other option. It's a very bleak world, and you're going to hear me say that a lot because it's meant to be a bleak place. And as I said earlier, these big companies pollute the earth behind the guise of innovation, which is exemplified by the line on the website. Our machinery is unrivaled in innovation and noxic light pollution capabilities. It's sort of satirical, but it hits the mark of, you know, what this company is supposed to represent. And the company also has you trapped, as I mentioned earlier. Certain phrases play throughout the album but also appear on the website, like vomit in the sink or sink in the vomit. You either have to just suck it up and, you know, vomit in the sink, or you're going to sink in your own vomit and drown in, you know, the disgusting working conditions. There's really no winning here. And also the phrase, as soon as you believe that you escape the rust, the claw crushes you into something unrecognizable. That basically just states that there's no chance for escape from Neurowaste or these big companies. They'll always have an effect on the world, or that literally they might just kill you if you were to, you know, disagree with what they're doing. It's just a very bleak scene, especially with the animal abuse that also goes on behind this company. The Neurowaste company reprocesses small algium, which are those fossilized creatures, into like little slugs and then powers their metal newt machines with those. Everything about this just shows how little the company values life, and I think that is supposed to represent how little many large companies in our world value life. And the part that kind of contextualizes this within the Tidal Memory world is the fact that algiums and memories, which is this other fossilized creature, constantly are fighting each other, but it's sort of Mother Nature's balance of, you know, they're fighting each other, but they balance each other out. And because the algium population is declining, that means that the memories are starting to take over, and it's gonna be bad for the world. That's the point of everything, is that everything this company does is bad for the world. And lastly, the whole war crane idea, one, super unique. That's that's cool to just think about like literal construction cranes as war machines. That also reflects the idea of highly paid military in the society today and how many companies fund the military. It's not very subtle, but I think the fictional Neurowaste company does reflect a lot of aspects of like late stage capitalism that we're kind of in right now. We're kind of headed for another Gilded Age, and although this album isn't saying that, it's mainly focused on companies' abuse of the earth. I think it contextualizes within how that Gilded Age, wealth distribution, and all that, it all adds together, and I think environmental impact is just one piece of the puzzle, and that's what Iglooghost is going over here. You know, it's scary to think about things like that just in daily life, and people often use, you know, music and art for a sort of escapism, but Iglooghost opts not to do that, as, you know, despite literally making a new world, the world of Bronzeclaw ISO really does reflect parts of our world today. And if you want to know more about, you know, the world that he built, I'll link the website, which is like neurowaste.net. Now I can finally talk about the music. Bronzeclaw ISO is not simply just a sequel to Tidal Memory Exo, although it does take place in the same world, has a lot of the same sort of sounds, those like grittier industrial sounds, those electronic trills and alarms. It strips away the very manic, experimental club, that side of EDM, calms it down and opts for something way closer to hip hop, with Iglooghost's rapping and singing being much more prominent on this project as opposed to the last. As on Tidal Memory Exo, you can hear him rapping, but it's not meant to be at the forefront of the mix. Here, it is meant to be the forefront of the mix. This is certainly a hip hop album. Continues with that sort of post-industrial fusion with EDM, but as opposed to making that into deconstructed club, that, you know, manic, rapid, high energy genre, it leans more towards drill and bass and other aspects of IDM and UK electronic genres. I think the direction he goes here is interesting, as adding more singing and more rapping to his repertoire evolves him as an artist. His singing on Metal Newt is very sincere. He embraces his limitations, but still makes it sound really good. And his increased focus on rapping is interesting, as he kind of paints pictures of the world he's building, as opposed to, you know, rapping about social issues or just going for cool rhyme schemes or bars. He takes a different approach, and that's what I appreciate about his music. I think the more stripped back approach here does work a lot of the time, but it also leaves me with a bit to be desired, as it's really hard to match that like quality and energy of Tidal Memory Exo. Mouth Breather for me is a bit underwhelming towards the end, and Slug Song, while I think it's a cool song, especially lyrically, it kind of focuses too much on that simplistic, albeit unique, story. But the production on both these tracks is great. Mouth Breather has some really great mixing, as like the electronic trills and vocal chops bounce through your ears. I mean, at this point, Iglooghost just, he knows how to mix a song. It kind of just leaves a bit to be desired with an underwhelming ending to the track. Slug Song is another cool fusion, as Iglooghost takes drill and bass, hip hop, and that post-industrial sound and combines it with that like signature Tidal Memory electronic trilling, alarms, chirps, whatever he does. It really just feels like a rap song made in the world of Tidal Memory Exo. At this point, he's kind of invented his own genre with such a unique style of IDM. The story on Slug Song is cool, but sonically it doesn't diversify itself enough. Whether, you know, that be the production or Iglooghost's flow and lyrical repetition, it just doesn't hit the mark for me at all times. But I do appreciate the lyricism on here, as the aforementioned vomit in the sink or sink in the vomit, along with how he compares himself to a spineless slug. He says, "I don't have a backbone either, we're the same." He's in the dirt here with this abusive company, but, you know, he doesn't have the backbone to protest it, quit his contract, because there is just that high risk, you know, getting crushed by the claw, as they said earlier. My favorite two tracks on this EP are Excavator 03 and Metal Newt, as both exemplify Iglooghost at his peak with this dive into the more toned down style of that post-industrial UK electronic music. Both of these tracks are infused with hip hop, whether it be the rapping on Excavator or the general style of production on Metal Newt. Metal Newt is interesting as well in the context of the world, as Metal Newt is the Algium animal-powered machine, and the track is very lyrically abstract. It kind of talks about this cyborgian machine, the Metal Newt, that Iglooghost sees himself in, or maybe is literally becoming. And I think Iglooghost's comparison to the machine here is important, as that's what the fictional Neurowaste company is treating its human employees like. These are just machines. Their feelings don't matter. They just do the work. And I think that's reinforced by the end of the track and the end of the EP, when it just says, "Shriveled mind, pointless body, Bronzeclaw ISO." It's very reductive of life itself and just makes everything into a thoughtless machine, and that's kind of the point of the world that he builds here. I also like this song sonically, as I think Iglooghost's singing is very gentle and sincere, and the production is also fantastic with this really cool drill and bass breakdown where it just feels like Iglooghost is just DJing in the middle of the crane. Although some of this music might seem like it's rudimentary for Iglooghost, you know, he can do this, he has done this before. Easy for him is still extremely good, as Excavator 03 is a fantastic track, and I don't think he's tried anything like that before, where he fuses together the industrial sounding IDM beat with hip hop, and it's in such like a satisfying and catchy way. I can't stop thinking about the, I rust and not corrode. It's just really catchy. I think Iglooghost is still at his peak artistically and kind of create whatever comes to his mind, whatever strange fusion he'd like to do. And that's kind of always been the appeal of him, is that he can make these fusions, and his dive into hip hop really, really works here. Again, the lyricism is cool, as the I rust and I corrode kind of shows how Iglooghost is slowly breaking down as a person working this job. Or maybe I'm overthinking it and it's literally just an excavator breaking down. Overall, I think Iglooghost is still at his prime on Bronzeclaw ISO, even if it's just a small taste of what he can do on those full-length projects. Excavator 03 and Metal Newt show really interesting artistic evolution, while the other tracks hold their own even if they aren't particularly crazy for Iglooghost standards. I also think his not-so-subtle commentary with the whole world building of the Neurowaste and the war cranes is really interesting, and it reflects a lot of the current abuse in the workplace, still due to industrialism. It was happening back then, it's still happening now. And there's a lot of nuances as well with the exact evils that this company is committing: animal abuse, pollution, derelict working conditions, and just destroying the environment and other communities as a whole. There's a lot to think about from just this short EP, as the world building meshes the music and the messaging together very nicely. And while I think the music itself is great, it's not really insane for Iglooghost standards, and it is an EP, so it is just a little short. I'd probably give the project itself a solid to high 7, but the world building through the Neurowaste company and the website that he made adds so much to the project and its themes that I just implore you to check out the world of Bronzeclaw ISO.